thank you for the introduction. So I'm actually Hungarian myself, Hungarian-American, American-Hungarian, whichever you choose to take it. I actually grew up about, Budapest is my homeland, my home city, and I grew up about 5 minutes from headquarters of Chemaxon. So it's very exciting for me to talk to a Hungarian, to the audience of a Hungarian, successful Hungarian software company here in Boston. So this is how much the world has changed since I left Hungary back in 1987, when we were still under the boots of the Soviets. So I'm really glad to be here. So, so again, I don't want to jump back and forth, but what is SharePoint? Actually, what you see is SharePoint. Believe it or not, you may think this is PowerPoint. Actually, this is SharePoint. I've uploaded this PowerPoint presentation to SharePoint, and I'm streaming it from SharePoint, from my intranet. So it's a little bit slow because I had to go behind our firewall. But when I scroll down, you see this? This is seamless within the browser. This is behind the head, what's behind it. So I actually uploaded the SharePoint presentation into our intranet site, and I'm doing a PowerPoint slide from the intranet. And why is this important? Because you can now collaborate on Office documents without having Office on your desktop. So we can actually upload documents, share documents, edit and annotate documents just from the browser. So of course, this is the capability of Office 2010 and SharePoint 2010. Obviously, I'm using our latest stack, but I do see certain people using Office 2007, Office 2010, and certain Windows. So I'm glad to see a lot of people are up to date with the latest technologies. So, and sorry about my password warning. Somebody is annoying me with that in the background. So I'm going to switch back to regular presentation mode here. It's a little bit faster. So Microsoft has some background here with, we formed the Bio-IT Alliance in 2006. I don't know. Some of the vendors here are part of the Bio-IT Alliance. Who has not heard of the Bio-IT Alliance in this industry, even though many of you are chemists? So most of you have heard of it. So anyway, that was the Microsoft initiative, but clearly we're not in this business to drive this. So we actually stepped back and made it really an open community, and its charter is now, we have a board of directors. We're the only one representation by one person from Microsoft, and the rest is from industry and from vendors. And it's a self-driving association with its own charter for translational medicine. So I wanted to get back to a little bit about what we're doing in the area of scientist innovation. And again, I'm not a chemist. I'm not a programmer either, so I'm probably the odd man out here. I'm actually a chemical engineer. So for me, software is cool, but it's really building blocks to build solutions. And it's very much, I take a very much an engineering approach to taking the stack and delivering solutions to it. So of course, we have the scientist innovation. We have a lot of areas we play in. Most of my background is in enterprise content management. I'm very gratified to see a lot of people who are talking about enterprise content management here. And the good news is I think that enterprise content management for many areas in terms of being a foundation, it could be a foundation for building block for building collaboration and content-centric applications. So clearly, back to SharePoint, SharePoint is a platform for content-centric applications. Therefore, it is a good platform in many cases for things like eLab notebooks. And some of the vendors who are here have shown SharePoint integration. So one of them, Kinematic, actually is building natively in SharePoint. Of course, I think that makes a lot of sense because if Microsoft has already invested billions of dollars in developing this platform, why would you want to? The chances are you'll spend a lot of engineering resources trying to build capabilities that come out of the box. So a vendor such as Kinematic, who actually embraces that, can actually focus in developing the solution rather than the basic building blocks of ECM. So to me, it seems to make a lot of sense to do that because they can move a lot faster. So when you look at the traditional scientist innovation cycle, it goes from search, integration, analysis, collaborating, reporting. These are some of the areas that we can address with our stack, and I wanted to show you some of these, actually even show a live demo, a couple of things we've done. So, and our team has already been involved in scientific types of things for a while. So of course, Going back to SharePoint, I don't want to just talk to you about SharePoint, but another aspect of SharePoint, what is it? It's the Office server. So most of you actually work with web technologies, but I'm sure most of you also use Office technologies. There was a lot of talk about Excel and Word, etc. So what we've done is we've done a lot of integration with these front-end technologies to back-end. So for example, there's a hidden or not too well-known feature in Office called Smart Tags. And what Smart Tags do, they can connect a keyword or other facets within Office to back-end web services. So what we can do with that, we can actually create a web services call, and we have a chemical compound name, we can actually look it up. So this was a pretty simple integration of using smart tags to actually integrate for chemists as they use Word and they pull in a chemical compound, they tag it, they can actually look up the compound names. Another one is the Chem4Spider. So some of our developers have done integration with Chem4Spider. It's a little bit more formal. I'm sure a lot of you know Chem4Spider. I'm not very familiar with it, but I do know it exists. And it's a tool that a lot of the chemists use. And here's another application that our team was involved, which is a pretty interesting application. It's a mixture between SharePoint and a technology called Silverlight, which is the Microsoft equivalent of scalable vector graphics. The nice thing about that is it's all XML based. So when you actually display an image in Silverlight, you can tag it anywhere. So this is actually a very complex 3D molecule representation in Silverlight that's actually surfaced in SharePoint. And what we've done is actually you can tag it, and these tags will save back in SharePoint. So here on one hand, you can take a more complex 3D visualization that you can actually, through Silverlight technologies, also look at it in 3D, in three-dimensional ways. And the metadata and tags are stored in SharePoint, so that makes them searchable, and the images are stored in SharePoint as well. This has actually been built about 4 years ago by the Scripps Institute of Molecular Biology, and there's a case study on our website as well. And of course, a scientific intelligence portal. SharePoint, again, one of the other things is I have to laugh when people, I've actually reviewed some of the presentations that were in Budapest at the last meeting. I don't know, apart from the Chemaxon folks, how many were there, but there was a very interesting presentation about SharePoint, and I hope to get to our Q&A session soon. But people were asking, well, what is SharePoint? Oh, I think it's a wiki. I think it's a blog. And people had just these basic notions where SharePoint is. It's actually a very broad-based platform for collaboration and content management and business intelligence. So I have a couple of slides on SharePoint as well. But again, SharePoint can also be a portal. This happens to be, I'm not going to name the name of the company because Chemaxon is here, but this kind of scientific portal that you could have with surfacing scientific data. I'm sure you recognize it, or some of you recognize this. One of my team members does a lot of visualization. This may be of interest to you. So what we've done actually, we've released this as open source. There's a lot of talk about open source. Actually, Microsoft also is into open source technologies. This happens to be a Microsoft open source technology. It's built on Windows Presentation Foundation. It's been ported to Silverlight. I don't want to give you too many acronyms. But the bottom line is this is like a notepad for scientists where you can just take stuff and throw it up there. And you can actually tag it, so you can index it, you can find it. Now we're actually releasing the latest version that stores the backend data in the Azure Cloud Services by Microsoft. And the front end is Silverlight, so you don't even need a client. And this is basically, you can download it from Codeplex, which is a Microsoft open source portal. And you can use it. It's a scientist notepad. It's not a formally supported product, but it's a very, very useful tool. Having said that, this is a case study where a more formal scientist collaboration tool and very heavily geared towards biologists. And of course, most of you in the room, from what I can tell, are interested in chemistry. But what we're finding is the needs of chemists and biologists are diverging. Chemists have very formal ways of doing notebooks, etc. Biologists have a much more informal way of collaborating. And what Pfizer has built is a portal called OnePoint, which is the combination of OneNote. Is anyone familiar with OneNote, what it is? Does anyone use it? Okay. It's kind of a hidden secret of Microsoft. OneNote is a note-taking tool that was developed for students mainly, but it's part of the, if your company owns Office, then OneNote comes with it. And OneNote is a very powerful free-flow collaboration tool that you can use for note-taking and collaboration. It sits on your desktop. And what Pfizer have done is they've taken the power of OneNote, combined it with SharePoint, so all that collaborative activity that teams do can actually be saved back to SharePoint, so it becomes a more formal and scientific collaboration tool. And as you can see, you have meeting minutes, presenters can add items to the page, etc. It's actually, this comes from the Drug Discovery Today, so you can find it yourself. And this is where we're kind of taking with SharePoint 2010, the latest release, of OneNote 2010, which is actually browser enabled. We're looking to enable this just by browser-based out-of-the-box technology, so companies such as Pfizer don't have to build it on their own. So what we're really looking for is to find partners such as independent software vendor who take this and make it into a product and actually sell it, because what people want is a supported product. Of course, eLab notebooks. We've had previous iteration of simple eLab notebooks. Clearly, SharePoint on the back end and Office on the front end with some enhancements such as digital signatures, PDF rendering, make it to as a platform for a very capable eLab notebook. And this is essentially what companies such as Kinematic are building. So we don't want to be in the business of building eLab notebooks. People have been asking us for years for this, but we really didn't have a good way to bring it to market. We have the technology stack for that, but somebody has to build it. Another interesting thing is I wanted to give you a couple of brief input about what Microsoft Research is doing. So clearly it's a huge, Microsoft is making huge investment in MSR, Microsoft Research Arm, and they're doing a whole bunch of stuff that is freely available to scientists. Not only librarians, but also research scientists. So this is actually a SharePoint portal. It's called the Research Information Center that we built for the British Library, actually, for librarians. But it's also, when you look at it, in the kinds of things it does, it's very similar to a scientist portal. It does have a projects overview, feedback, alerts, MySpaces, event notification, all that scientists need to collaborate. Of course, the good news is with the 2010 stack, a lot of this is actually built in, and you don't have to customize it. There's also Microsoft Biology framework that Microsoft Research is working on. Again, it's open source development. It has integrated Excel add-ins that people can use, scientific high-performance workflows, such as the Trident workflow engine that was built by Microsoft for oceanographic research. It's a very high-performance, high-volume workflow engine to do millions of experiments per hour and have workflow drive it. We have Chem4Word Add-in, ontology, authoring. All these sorts of things are available. So I'm sure in your work, as you're looking for some of these tools, you can just go to www.msr.research or Microsoft/research and look at some of these tools that are available. There's a significant investment and effort to developing open source tools. And of course, it's open source, and where all this comes in, they're designed to work on the Office stack. So if somebody already owns Office, then they can all be these free add-on tools. It's got visualization, all those sorts of things, and a lot of the Iron Python and the other open source and open standard stuff that people used to working with. Really, we have to be pragmatic about it. It's not only about Microsoft on .NET. We have to work well with whatever people have. I just created the screenshot today, actually. It's pretty simplistic, but it's free. It's Chem4Word Add-in. I'm actually running it on my Word implementation. It's a free add-in. So basically, on the left-hand side, I can actually have molecules I can pull up. And where this really becomes interesting is right now we've released the Chem4Word Add-in, But where it really becomes interesting is you can actually, this is based on standard, what we call controls, content controls that now connect directly to SharePoint. So it's very easy to extend and take some of these compounds and actually add metadata to it, tag it, save it back to SharePoint, and everything becomes searchable then because the tags are findable. Also starting to do some work with Pivot that I'm actually super excited about. I'm a geek, as you may tell, and I get fascinated by technology. So I wanted to show you this. So suppose you have a huge data set, whether you're working with imaging, scientific images, gel images, blotter images, or DICOM images. These images, the problem is actually how you find this stuff and how you sort it. So Microsoft has released a, this is for free, called Pivot. Has anyone heard of Pivot? Okay. Well, that's good. Three out of you? Well, but this is, I'm really fascinated by this because here actually, and I'm going to try to run this demo for you live just so you can see. So what we have is a couple of gigabytes of chromosome images of chromosome 9 uploaded into the clouds, into the Azure server. Have you heard of Azure, the Azure Services platform that Microsoft has built? So this is basically a cloud-based operating system and a computing cloud. And we've taken some chromosome images, uploaded them, and basically what you can do is, so this is chromosome number 9, and what you can do is look at the band and start to say, I want to look at this band, and all of a sudden this gets rearranged. You can actually start all these manipulations with it, pan and zoom, and you can visualize it in different ways. And basically this is, the interesting thing with business intelligence is to be able to look at very large data sets, but you're not doing data, not always doing intelligence, but you're looking at large data sets saying, what am I missing? So it's not so much what I'm looking for, but I can actually manipulate these images. And I can give you an example in an R&D application. I was working with a very, very large biopharmaceutical firm who was looking at talent management applications. And they said, I want to put together a research team, and they have to be left-handed, Mandarin-speaking people who lived in Hong Kong for 5 years, but have a PhD at MIT. And basically, I mean, this is a rather extreme sort of criteria, but when you have metadata, and that's one of my favorite words, I'm actually known as Mr. Metadata within Microsoft. When you have metadata, you can actually start to tag these things. You can actually able to sort on these things. It becomes pretty amazing. Now, of course, this technology is actually now being ported to SharePoint as well. So imagine you can have large amounts of images in SharePoint with relevant metadata. You can draw these so-called pivot collections and start pivoting on the data. What I'm showing you now is built on Windows Presentation Foundation, but we also have a Silverlight version of it. So you can start to see the power of this, and I think the potential of this is absolutely huge. So having said that, one final word that I wanted to talk about is the other problem that we're solving in collaboration with our customers is the so-called L drive problem. So many customers have multiple terabytes of data just stored away in file systems, and they have a real issue with that. They have multiple versions of the document. They have links that are embedded that link to other documents, and they really can't get away from file systems. And of course, bless you, when you look at what SharePoint can do, it is in many applications also a replacement for a file system. But what you get, what you don't get with a file system, you have version control, you have audit trails, you have precise control, you have enterprise search, you have metadata tagging. So one of the applications, again, to take the discussion back to SharePoint, what is SharePoint? It's also a replacement for file systems. So you can't just rip out a file system, put it in SharePoint. You have to basically clean up and deduplicate the data and make sure you don't have breaking links. But relying on file systems to store scientific papers is really a barrier to innovation and collaboration. So this is another area where SharePoint can help. To go back to the question of what SharePoint can do is actually clean up and migrate that data, store it in SharePoint, and at that point, you can actually make it available for collaboration and to mine your corporate knowledge. And you don't necessarily have to rely on esoteric and expensive data mining tool to find things, because if you have a powerful search engine and metadata and tagging capabilities, you can do that. I wanted to, so I don't, we don't run out of time. I just want to quickly cycle through some of the things that I think are very important in SharePoint 2010 and maybe actually show you a couple of examples how we're using SharePoint internally. And the reason why I'm doing that is I want to make sure that I have time for Q&A. But the more information I give to you based on the questions that I have reviewed at the Budapest meeting, I think the more information you'll have, so you won't have, hopefully, as many questions. Of course, I may be wrong. I hope I can get there. And I'm still fading in and out. I don't know why. So SharePoint 2010, so people ask, should we go with SharePoint 2007 and SharePoint 2010? Well, my answer to you is if you have the choice, then go to 2010. Not because it's the latest and greatest, or not only because it's the latest and greatest, and not because I'm actually here to push Microsoft technology. It's just so much more powerful. It has so much more built-in capabilities. So if you're at that decision point, 2010 is the way to go. The other misconception about SharePoint is there's SharePoint services, or what's known as SharePoint Foundation, and SharePoint Server. And many companies, large global companies who some of you work for, have SharePoint. But a department can also just put up a Windows server and put up a SharePoint collaboration site, and that's very, very dangerous because then you've created a silo of information. So we need to make a distinction between SharePoint Foundation and SharePoint Enterprise Services. If you have an enterprise service on SharePoint, then you can use enterprise search, you can add enterprise taxonomies, all those things that are not available if you just put an ad hoc collaboration site. So SharePoint can be an ad hoc collaboration site, but that's meant for ad hoc project teams. And at the end of the day, it's not meant for corporate knowledge. So when that teamwork is done, you really should wipe out that SharePoint site. It's ad hoc collaboration. But for scientists, you need a lot more than that. So I hope that clarifies the distinction between SharePoint services, what is SharePoint, and SharePoint Enterprise. So SharePoint, basically, we say it's the business collaboration platform, the enterprise, and the internet. The 6 main facets of it are SharePoint sites, which are collaboration sites, communities, content search insights, business insights, and composite applications. This comes from the SharePoint team. But what is very important, I think, for scientists is to create a community. You work together in teams. So the community aspects of SharePoint is very, very powerful from informal knowledge, social connections, to being able to participate from anywhere just via browser. And these are some of the things you can get. If we have time, and I'll leave that to the very end, I can actually show you a real-life internal Microsoft site, how I can put up my presence, how I can actually add content, my profile, how I can enable other people to find my profile. So suppose that you're putting together a scientific team, and you need to find other people with same interests, communities of practice, SharePoint can enable that. So cross-team, ad hoc collaboration, very, very important. Knowledge management, knowledge sharing. People talk about knowledge management is becoming in vogue again, but that's because the tools are much more powerful to support it. So you have embedded presence. Imagine that you're both working in SharePoint, and just through seeing, oh, this other team member of mine is online, I can click on that and actually spawn off an instant messenger communication. I don't have to find them. I don't have to call them. I see they're there. They're working the same document. I can actually create a document and have 10 people work on the same document at the same time between Office and SharePoint, which is something the scientific community has been asking us for a long, long time. That really comes with the stack now. I can add comments. I can actually embed rich media. I can rate the content, so social tagging capabilities. I can even add cloud navigation. So once again, everything is metadata enabled. Activities, I can show this. This is basically my personal site where I can show you my interest and status update and activities. I can define my responsibilities interests. So for example, I put in my own site that I'm an expert at enterprise content management. If somebody is looking for an expert at enterprise content management, they will find me just by search. And I can search on capabilities and people and tags. So that's what I meant, search by expertise and profile. You can define your colleagues, so you have internal communities within SharePoint. And again, going back to my favorite word, next to goulash soup, it's metadata and tags. So actually, I can take content, I can tag it. SharePoint now has enterprise metadata and taxonomies. So again, why is that important? Because you need to classify information. And in the past, it was, if it's too onerous to classify information, people will not do it. So the biggest barrier to collaboration is not having enough metadata about content, because content without context is incomplete. People have search tools to try to find stuff. It's not good enough. And of course, there's many vendors who have search, who also say the same thing, that search tools aren't good enough. And that's why they have deep text mining and data analysis and everything. You need that too, but I need to say what this is about, because I need to find it, and my colleagues need to find it, and I need to be able to have formal taxonomies as well as folksonomies, that people know, the dig.com, etc. So basically with SharePoint, it's just a different way of looking at metadata, but it supports both. And this actually brings up some interesting context, because a lot of what you work with, again, are images, are chemical formulas, and how you find it. You have very specialized and high-end tools to actually search for chemical formulas. But on the other hand, if you have the formula name, you can search on it. But if you also tag it with stuff that you need, out of time, then you can do it. So search. So I'm pretty much done. I showed you the PowerPoint slideshow. What was also important, when you upload content into SharePoint with the new search tool that's enabled, actually when you're looking for something, you don't even need to open the PowerPoint. You can actually just preview it. So it saves a whole ton of time as compared to previous ways of working. So, and insights that I'm really excited about, of course, we had our good friends from Spotfire here. We also work closely, and they have great integrations into Excel. But we can actually even do things like import 100 million rows into a database, actually put Excel on top of that, and actually publish it down to SharePoint. So you have this real easy way of working with massive data sets. Of course, we're not going up into exabytes. That's a specialized area. But SharePoint and Excel working together enable that. So you know what? I'm going to stop here because we want to have time, and I don't want to hear the clink of the timer lady here again. So. I hope this was helpful, and you know, I always present in a very interactive way. I'm glad you didn't have any questions, because this means I had your attention for about 35 minutes, which is a good thing.